So, first rule of public speaking is know your audience, right? So, before I came today, how many of you had ever heard of First Liberty Institute? Well, my job's done. Thank y'all. So as she said, First Liberty Institute, we are a 501c3 nonprofit law firm and think tank. We only litigate one type of issue, and that is defending religious liberty. We are listed with the IRS as a Christian ministry. However, we will represent people of any faith anywhere in America. So long as that person or ministry or entity is just simply trying to live according to what they believe in a way that's in keeping with the law and the Constitution, we will protect their right to do so. We're headquartered in Plano, up in the Dallas area. We have a small office in DC as well. We have I think we're at about 60 full-time employees, but that's everything. That's accounting, HR. About 15, 16 attorneys that work full-time in-house for us. But then we have a network of volunteer attorneys who are in firms working in private practice all over the country. And they volunteer their time to work with us. That's how we can take a case in. They act as the local counsel when we come in. We typically bring the client, some subject matter expertise, and that enables them to just do what they do, litigate. So if it's an appeal, handle the appeal. These attorneys, our volunteer attorneys, are some of the best in the country, some of the biggest, most powerful firms in the country, and that allows us to put together really great teams for our clients. As a 501c3, we are supported by donors around the country, so no client of First Liberty ever gets a bill for our services. So everybody we represent for free. Even volunteers that donate their time pro bono as well. So as a C3, we try to be good stewards of our donors' money. So the first thing I should tell you is this is not the view from our DC office. We have a few attorneys up there, and then we have a couple of attorneys that actually live and work from home around the country as well. So, as I said, the only kind of case we handle is religious liberty, and we will defend any faith. We have represented probably every denomination of Christianity that you can think of, and maybe one or two that you can. We have multiple Orthodox Jewish clients right now. We have represented Buddhists, Sikhs, Hindus, Muslims, the Native American Sweat Lodge. That I honestly don't even know what you call that religion, but they've got a right to practice it, so we defend it. And we do that, for several reasons. One, that's what the First Amendment is all about. Two, on a personal level, I don't really feel like I deserve a right that I'm unwilling to defend for somebody else. And our practice is to defend the principle of religious liberty, not necessarily one religion or another. The founders intended with the First Amendment to protect the proper role of religion in a free and civil society. They understood that freedom and morality are inextricably linked. That if you just have freedom, but there's no common sense of morality in the nation, everyone's just free to do what's right in the sight of his own eyes, the strong will inevitably oppress the weak. And you end up back in tyranny. Right? So, even though there's lots of laws on the books that protect religious liberty, obviously the First Amendment is the bedrock of everything we do. And you probably know the first two clauses in the First Amendment are what protects religion. You have the Establishment Clause: Congress will make no law respecting the establishment of a religion, nor prohibiting free exercise. Let me just start there. The Establishment Clause, and I'm going to talk about a few of our cases. And I understand with everything that's going on, and I'm going to try my best to leave some time for Q&A, and I'll deal with all the COVID stuff in Q&A. Because I know there's probably questions about that, and it created an entire new area of practice for us. We've been very, very, very busy these last 2 years. So I'm going to talk about a few of our cases that you might have heard of that just sort of demonstrate the big picture of what we do. And this first one, talking about the Establishment Clause. The Bladensburg World War I Veterans Memorial stands in Bladensburg, Maryland, right outside of Washington, D.C. And this is what it looks like, the memorial itself. But the soldier is the focus of the picture, because that's really what the case comes down to. Because that monument was to honor these men. And Gold Star moms, early 1920s, wanted to put up a memorial for their sons who did not come back from World War I. And Early 1900s, transatlantic travel was not exactly common or affordable. So these mothers didn't know if they would ever see their son's actual grave sites. So in doing this monument, they chose the shape of the cross for the monument because they wanted it to resemble the actual headstones their sons were buried over in Europe. Also not knowing if their sons' bodies would ever make it back over here to be buried, they considered this to be a marker for their sons. So that's why they chose the shape of the cross. Now, in the center of it is the seal of the American Legion, who was our client in this case. The American Legion donated the property for the monument originally. And this was completed, as I said, in the early 1920s. And it stood there for many, many years without really bothering anybody. In the early 1950s, as the DC metro area started to expand, the state of Maryland was going to expand a highway. Ironically enough, it's called the Veterans Memorial Highway. And the highway was coming right at the monument. They didn't want to disturb the monument, so the road literally curved around it. Okay? So now it was in the median of the highway. So the state took over control of the property in that process, early 1950s. Still stood there for 50 plus years, not bothering anybody, until the American Humanist Association sent a couple of their members to drive past it and get offended by it so that they could file a lawsuit to tear it down. Their theory of that case was that having a religious symbol on government-owned property violates the Establishment Clause of the Constitution. So the Establishment Clause is actually pretty simple, right? Congress will make no law respecting the establishment of a religion. At the time that was ratified, 1789, our founding fathers had just finished winning a war with Great Britain. At the time, the greatest empire the world had ever known. It had the Church of England that you were taxed to support, whether or not you ever darkened the door of a church building. If you were a citizen of England, you were supporting the Church of England. And they didn't want that here. They did not want there to be an official church of the United States of America. That's it. It's really that simple. It takes lawyers and judges to complicate something that simple, and over 200 years, we did a good job of complicating it. Okay. But the Humanist Association are somehow claiming that this religious symbol on a piece of property owned by the government has officially established the official church of the United States of America. I bet you didn't know that, right? Almost 100 years you've been living in the country with an official state church because there's a Veterans Memorial in Lewisville, Maryland. So, on behalf of the Legion, we took the case, and we won at the district court level. The Humanist Association appealed to the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, and any lawyers in the room? Yeah, you don't get to ask questions. You don't get to ask questions. When you go in front of a court of appeals, you don't sit in front of the entire court. You get a random 3-judge panel. Okay? And our 3-judge panel were 2 Obama appointees and a Clinton appointee. Now let me kind of pull over and park for a second and talk about judges. When you hear people talk about judges and they use terms like a liberal judge or a conservative judge, they're not really talking about their political ideology or who they vote for. They're talking about their method of interpreting the Constitution. A conservative jurist, sometimes called a textualist or an originalist, their approach is the Constitution says what it means what it says, and if there's any question about that, you go back to what the words meant in 1789 when they were ratified. Okay? The more liberal interpretation is that the Constitution is a living document, and that it can evolve over time, and words can mean something today that they didn't mean in 1789. We tend to adhere to the textualist interpretation, because if something can mean one thing yesterday and mean something completely different today, then it's meaningless tomorrow. It is strictly in the eye of the beholder. Whatever that judge decides it means today, that's what it means. And if that's the case, you're no longer a nation ruled by law and ruled by man, which was not the founders intent. So our 3-judge panel were 2 Obama appointees and a Clinton appointee. So we did not like our chances at the Fourth Circuit. And in fact, at oral argument at the Fourth Circuit, one of the judges actually posed the question, well, couldn't we just chop the arms off the cross? And then it would no longer be a religious symbol, and we wouldn't have to tear the whole thing down, that way it could stay. We heard that question and didn't like our chances. And they ruled against us. But it was 2-1. Clinton appointee actually wrote a really nice dissent who used to appeal to the United States Supreme Court. The Supreme Court took the case, and by a 7-2 decision, said that the Bladensburg World War I Memorial does not violate the Establishment Clause. Now, when you get a chance to go to the United States Supreme Court, you want to make the absolute most of that opportunity because it doesn't come along that often, right? So our argument at the Supreme Court was not only does this monument not violate the Constitution, but there's an old case that the Supreme Court has been using to analyze these issues for 40 plus years called Lemon versus Kurtzman. It's been known as the Lemon test ever since then, and that's the test that the judges are supposed to apply to decide if something violates the Establishment Clause. Law professors and judges love three-part tests, okay? And the Lemon test had become this test that was so convoluted that really nothing could pass the test. Every time a judge applied it, whatever was in question ended up getting struck down. And just for example, one of the three parts of that three-part test is, does the subject matter in question create excessive government entanglement with religion? Now, who here can tell me what government entanglement with religion means? Once you figure that out, tell me how to identify excessive government entanglement with religion. Right? It ends up being in the eye of the beholder. And it was this test nothing could pass. So our argument to the Supreme Court was, the Bladensburg Memorial does not violate the Establishment Clause, and you should get rid of this Lemon test, because it has caused way more confusion in the lower courts than it ever clarified. You need to get back to the original intent of the First Amendment. Now, oral argument at the Supreme Court went pretty well for us. And you know, when you're arguing from an appellate court, you spend months getting ready, you've got this great argument, and you get maybe a few minutes into it, and the judges interrupt you, and they just start peppering you with questions, right? And it's usually designed to draw out the weaknesses in your case. Our volunteer attorneys did a great job arguing our case, and the attorney for the Humanist Association, she was doing pretty good, but she had kind of tap danced around this question for a while, and finally one of the justices pinned her down. I was not in the room for this because I kind of help with media, so I was out in front of the Supreme Court wrangling the media in February in DC. It was colder there than it was here today. But one of the justices finally kind of pinned her down and said, if I'm understanding you correctly, and I'm paraphrasing because this was all in legalese, right? That's kind of my job. I translate legalese into English. Okay? If I'm understanding you correctly, anywhere there's a religious symbol on government property would violate the Establishment Clause. Yes or no? And she said yes. And when she did, a couple of the justices kind of glanced around the room, because in the Supreme Court chamber, there's a Ten Commandments monument, right? And the audience chuckled a little bit, even though it's the Supreme Court, it's supposed to be very solemn or something. So we heard that question, and we kind of liked our chances. Right? So then we had to wait for the opinion to come out. The Supreme Court has this habit of whatever opinion, whatever case they think is probably going to be the most controversial of that term, they release it on the very last day of the term and then go on vacation. Just leave town, right? And sure enough, it was like the very last week of the term, this decision came out. And we were waiting on it. The kind of conventional wisdom around our office was, if it's a 7-2, a 6-3, a big majority, then we probably won on the memorial, but they probably didn't deal with women, because that's how a conservative bloc would get a couple of the liberals to come with. It comes out it's 5-4, we probably got everything we want. Right? We probably got conservatives. So it comes out to 7-2. Well, that's great. At least the memorial survived it. Then we started reading the opinion, and for the lawyers in the room, it's actually very interesting because it splits off several ways. By a 7-2 majority, they say this monument does not violate the Establishment Clause. And then by a 5-4, they said, and this whole Lemon versus Kurtzman thing, we're not going to do that anymore. Now, they would not come out and say Lemon is overturned, right? Because Justice Roberts, frankly, does not want to overturn anything. He is a slave to precedent. That's just the world according to Watts, not attributable to First Liberty Institute. That's just my opinion. But by 5-4, they said, and this Lemon versus Kurtzman, we're not going to do that anymore. From now on, any monument or symbol or practice, that's an important word because that covers a lot of things. Any monument, symbol, or practice that's in keeping with the history and tradition of this country is now presumed constitutional. Now, bad lawyer joke, pardon the pun. That is a monumental shift in the court's thinking on the Establishment Clause, and it gets much more, back to that original intent of the Establishment Clause. And we saw immediate results of this. Our client, the American Legion, had already identified 3,000 veterans memorials around the country that are now protected. In South Carolina, there was a police officer's memorial that included a prayer on it that had already been removed, and they put it back. As soon as this decision came out, that's in keeping with our history tradition, put the monument back. In Lehigh County, Pennsylvania, the county seal includes symbols from the history of the county, including the cross. It was being litigated to remove the cross off the county seal. This decision came out, it stays. So this is, not to kind of break our arm and pat ourselves on the back, but this really is probably the biggest win on the Establishment Clause in 40 years. And it really does return us closer to the intent of the Establishment Clause. So, moving on. So let's move to the Free Exercise Clause. Now, like I said, lawyers and judges have complicated things a lot. And what we see in a lot of our cases is that government going so far out of its way, trying not to violate the Establishment Clause, that they end up violating the Free Exercise Clause. And that's exactly what happened to Coach Kennedy. Coach Joe Kennedy was a football coach in Bremerton, Washington, right outside of Seattle. I say was because he was fired by the school district for doing that. At the end of football games, he would go to the middle of the field and take a knee for about 15 to 30 seconds and silently thank God for the opportunity to coach. Coach spent 20 years in the Marine Corps, so coaching was kind of a second career for him. He got out, he was looking for something else to do. If he was standing here with me, he would tell you himself, had a rough childhood, not a great kid. Marine Corps cured him of all of that, and when he got out, he wanted to help kids who were similar to him. And he was trying to figure out how he was going to do that. He was up late one night and was channel surfing, and he comes across this movie called Facing the Giants, a little Christian film about football, right? He's like, oh, okay, well, okay, God, if that's what you want, then I'll look for an opportunity to do that, maybe. He's out jogging one day, and he's wearing a Bremerton high school shirt because he graduated from Bremerton. The guy pulls up next to him and calls and says, hey, did you go to Bremerton? Yeah. You wouldn't want to help coach football, would you? And Coach Kennedy says, I don't know anything about football. And the guy says, well, you know what, it's really okay, because I've got guys for the X's and O's, but a lot of my players are from really rough backgrounds. A lot of them don't have dads. And I need somebody who can kind of help them with all the character stuff. And the coach is like, okay, I got it. So he talked to his wife about it, prayed about it, and he made a commitment to God before he ever took the job. If you bless me with the opportunity to coach and help these kids, at the end of the game, win or lose, I will go to the middle of the field and I will thank you for that opportunity. And that's what he did for 7 years in Bremerton, Washington. Not exactly the buckle of the Bible Belt, right? Not exactly the most churched area in America. No one ever complained about what Coach Kennedy was doing for 7 years. It was a compliment about what he was doing that even alerted the school district to his practice. Because what happened was, over time, some of the players did notice what he was doing and they asked him what he was doing. He told them, this is just my thing, I go out there and I think about it. And some of them asked if they could come with him. And his answer was, I quote, it's a free country, you can do what you want. So some of the players started coming with him. Now some of those players weren't religious, they asked him about it. Same thing, it's a free country, do what you want. No, you don't have to come with me. So what he would do is he would go to the middle of the field and say his own personal prayer. And when he was finished, if there were players still around, he just started giving kind of impromptu pep talks to whoever was left. And they got to be very popular. In fact, some of the opponents started sticking around to hear Coach Kennedy's post-game pep talk about football and life and all this stuff. And that's what alerted the school district to what he was doing. It was a compliment from another school to his folks saying, hey, we love what Coach Kennedy's doing. And like any good bureaucrat, somebody who reports to you gets a compliment, launch an investigation, right? Again, that's my own personal opinion about bureaucrats. You are bureaucrats, I apologize. We married this young, I know there's some good. So they initially came to Coach and said, you absolutely cannot pray with the players. Okay? And, Coach, this was my thing. The players might be disappointed, but that's okay. I'll explain that. Then they came back to him and said, actually, you cannot pray at all. And Coach is a Marine, and as politely as he could, said, you know, I made a commitment to an authority much higher than you. And I understand the position that you think you're in. I have to do what I have to do. You do what you got. In the next game, he finished. He waited until the players went off to sing the fight song with the band, so none of them would be tempted to come with him and get themselves in trouble. He walked in the middle of the field, and he's told me, I knew as I was walking to the middle of the field, this is the last time I'm going to be on this football field. He took his knee, said his prayer, and they fired him. So, the school district's position was that they were doing all this because they did not want to violate the establishment clause. The school district is government. He's a government employee. Been doing this religious speech, but somehow established the official church in the United States of America. Now, I'm a big college football fan. You college football fan? What teams?
Alabama.
Missouri, Bama, LSU.
Houston.
Sorry, I went to law school on this, so there's no. Navy.
HBU Huskies.
All right. All right. I did. Yeah. Okay. So the Bulldog guys, since y'all are the national champions, let me ask you this: in all the years you've watched Georgia football, you have probably seen many times, because they got a really great offense, a player cross the goal line, take a knee, get up, celebrate with his teammates, right? In all the times you've seen that happen, did you ever once watch that and go, huh, Christianity must be the official religion of the University of Georgia? Of course not, right? That was his own personal expression. But that was the school district's position, right? That you're speaking on behalf of the school district, and that's religious speech, and that's somehow violating the establishment clause. Now, our position was, of course, no, it's not. That's his personal speech. He does not shed his First Amendment rights just by walking onto a public school campus. So we took it to district court. We lost. Went up to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which lawyers in the room know. We kind of refer to it as the Ninth Circus. It is by far the most liberal court in America, although the Fourth Circuit is giving them a run for their money. So the Ninth Circuit ruled against him, and their opinion actually said that if he or any government employee does something religious, and anyone can see you do it, that person is going to assume you're speaking on behalf of the government, and that's religious speech by a government employee, and you have now violated the establishment clause. So we appealed that to the United States Supreme Court. Now, Supreme Court, other than the lawyers, here's some guesses. How many cases in a typical term do you think get appealed to the Supreme Court? Thousands? I feel like an auctioneer. 500, 400, 200. In a typical term, it's usually somewhere in the neighborhood of 7,000 to 8,000 cases are appealed to the Supreme Court. Now,
What kind of first labor do you have?
Now, the judges vote on which cases they're going to hear, right? If 4 people vote to hear a case, it goes on the grant list. If you don't get 4 votes, it goes on the denial list. So in a typical term, out of those 7,000 to 8,000, how many do you think they actually hear? 50? So it's usually somewhere in the neighborhood of 70 to 80, about 1%. Okay. So the odds are against you. They're just a numbers game, right? So we appeal to the Supreme Court, and then we have to just kind of wait and see if they're going to take it. And every week during session, there's a list of cases that are published that they're going to meet and discuss. And then at the end of that week, they put out their orders for that list. And it's, they're never good out. And his case kept getting relisted week after week, so they were really discussing it a lot. Now, the justices are the only people in the room when they do this. Nobody else. Folks like me, legal dorks, would give a lot to be in that room one time and listen to that discussion. So then one day we come in and coach is on the denial list. And so we're pretty bummed. But the Supreme Court did something very, very rare in that they published an opinion as to why they didn't take the case. Now, when you're denying 7,000 to 8,000 cases, you don't have time to explain why, right? It's just deny. So that got a lot of people's attention, the fact that they published an opinion as to why they didn't take it. And technically, it's called a concurrence with the decision not to go to circuit. It was written by Justice Alito, and it was joined by Thomas, Gorsuch, and Kavanaugh. So there's 4 names on it, right? And remember, 4 votes to take it, and it'd be on the granted list. So now it's got 4 names on it, so it's really good. And then we started reading what it said. Again, I'm paraphrasing because it's in legalese, but it said basically, we agree with the decision not to hear the case right now because there are some questions of fact on the record, all the way back down at the district court level, and we don't think we're really clarified enough. And if we took it, we would get bogged down in this fact-based inquiry. Nobody wants the Supreme Court to do that. You want them to answer the big First Amendment question, right? Then Justice Alito went out of his way to criticize the Ninth Circuit's opinion, which we appreciated. Called it extremely troubling, which is about as sassy as the Supreme Court gets when they're talking about another court. We find their opinion extremely troubling. And that it might warrant review in the future, right? So that gave us some hope. And then right towards the end of the opinion, in fact, it might even be the last sentence. I have to go back and read it. And I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but it says, the petitioner brought this to us as a free speech case, which we did, right? Because there's an old Supreme Court case, again, called Employment Division versus Smith, that made winning free exercise cases almost impossible. What it did was it lowered the court's scrutiny towards government action, lowered the bar so low that it's really almost impossible to win free exercise cases. So we appealed this as a free speech case. That's his speech, not the government's. So this last little sentence is, the petitioner brought this as a free speech case when he clearly has a free exercise claim. Perhaps you didn't press the free exercise claim because of previous decisions by this court, which we have not yet been asked to review. Y'all getting ahead of it, right? That is Justice Alito doing everything but including an eye wink emoji to say, the four of us know that Smith is a problem, and we want to do something about it, right? So, here's my second lawyer bad joke, bad pun of the day. We used that opinion as a playbook for Coach Kennedy, right? We went back down to the district court, got the record clarified. He's still bound by the Ninth Circuit's opinion, so he rules against us. We went back up to the Ninth Circuit. They ruled against us again. This time, one of the judges actually, in his opinion, went out of his way to criticize Coach Kennedy and say that his prayers on the field violated Jesus' teachings from the Sermon on the Mount as to how to pray. Let me just say, judges are empowered to interpret the laws of men, not the laws of God. That is not his job. So we appealed to the Supreme Court again. And just last Friday, the Supreme Court granted cert to Coach Kennedy. So they are going to hear this. Now, they may actually hear it this term. They don't have as many cases this term as they typically do, so there's a chance they might actually hear this as early as April. And if not, it'll be in the fall time. So this, when they denied it the first time, Barrett wasn't on the court yet, and now she is. And the Supreme Court actually had a chance to do something about Employment Division versus Smith last term, in a case called Fulton versus Philadelphia. And they completely punted. They did not deal with it. So our hope is that our case is the one they want to use to get rid of Employment Division versus Smith. And I mean, as lawyers, we're ethically obligated to win for our clients, right? I know that sounds like an oxymoron, lawyers and ethics, right? But we are ethically obligated to win for him. The coach understands that this case is much bigger than him now. And that's why he would put up with this. But this has been going on over 6 years. Right? Now, getting back to our model, can you imagine what his legal bill would be if we were billing him by the hour? 7, maybe 8 figures. Okay. There's no way he can take the stand that he has. Coach is a Marine, he never would have given up, right? But he understands now this is going to be bigger than him. If they use his case to get rid of Employment Division versus Smith and go back to the old standard called strict scrutiny, which is the highest level, the bar is really high for the government to get over, you and your kids and grandkids will be living in a country with more religious freedom than any of us have had in the last 30 years. So, pray for Coach and his family. His wife actually worked for the school district in HR. So technically he was suing his wife. What do you think that does for a marriage? Right? It is not easy to be a client of First Lady. Okay? Nobody wakes up wanting to be our clients. So pray for Coach and his family. Pray that the court does the right thing. And we want to win this for him. We want this resolved for him. even if they don't touch employment provision. That's a huge win because it's going to tell every government employee, again, you do not shed your First Amendment right when you go to work for the government. Right? But like I said, hopefully they use it to fix employment abuses. Now maybe I'm running short on time. I want to leave some time for questions, so I'm going to go through this one very quickly. This is probably our other most famous client, Aaron and Melissa Klein, bakers up in Oregon, who had a family-owned bakery. Same-sex couple asked them to custom design a wedding cake. They politely explained they'd be happy to serve them on other occasions. They just can't be a part of the wedding. That did not sit well with the couple. They filed a complaint with the Oregon Bureau of Labor and Industry, who assessed the largest financial penalty in the history of that state agency, $135,000, and bankrupted the client's business. Now, I'm a child of the Cold War, so the Oregon Bureau of Labor and Industry already has a Soviet ring to it. And the administrator said in the press, in a quote, that his goal was to rehabilitate the clients. To which, my response was there a special camp you want them to go to? Where they concentrate a lot? Till they come up with the right view? Regardless of what people's views on marriage are, everyone ought to be able to agree that it is anathema to the Constitution that a government bureaucrat can bankrupt a business because he doesn't like the religious beliefs of that business owner. So we took that case up to the Supreme Court. They did what we asked, which is called grant, vacate, remand. Grant means they took it, vacate, they erased the lower court decision, remand, they sent it back to them. Hey, you want to do this again? Because this case was going on right about the same time as the Masterpiece Cake Shop case in Colorado. Very, very similar fact pattern. They ruled in favor of that baker. So they basically sent this back to the Oregon court with a copy of the Masterpiece decision and said, hey, let's try this again. That was over 2 years ago. The Oregon Court of Appeals has sat on this case for 2 years. And I'm convinced because those judges do not want to give the clients a win, and they know they have to. They are bound by the Supreme Court to do so. So pray for the clients that they will persevere until we get this decision, we get it fixed for them. I could read you some of the hate mail these people got, and it would curl your nails. Stuff like Facebook messages that say, I hope your kids get cancer. That's one of the cleaner ones that I can tell you about. All because they just told the folks, we can refer you to another baker for your wedding. We're happy to serve you on other occasions. And that's really should be the reasonable middle ground on this issue. Ever since the 60s and the so-called sexual revolution, there have been kind of two groups of people trying to figure out a way to peacefully coexist. Right? And this should be the reasonable middle ground we can all agree on. Right? If you won't use the government to try to bankrupt my business, I won't ask you who you're sleeping with. You come in and ask and order some muffins and call, right? That should be a way we can all get along. That's all they were trying to do. They lost their American dream. So pray for them as well. So these are some of our bigger cases. The big buckets that all of our cases fall into. We typically defend churches and ministries protecting their rights to do what they do. In fact, I didn't realize it until I pulled up this morning. We actually defended this church. A few years ago, after Hurricane Harvey, FEMA was partnering with churches to distribute aid to the community. They just couldn't apply for FEMA aid to help restore their churches. So we represented this church and several others in Houston. We held a little press conference downstairs. It was still basically drying out, and we called out FEMA for it, and they kind of changed their mind once they knew we were getting ready to sue them in federal court. So churches and ministries in the military, I don't have a lot of time to talk about military cases, but we have a lot of cases in the military. We represent 35 Navy SEALs right now who have religious convictions that prevent them from taking a government-mandated vaccine. We just won a preliminary injunction in that case where the court we filed in the Northern District of Texas, and Judge O'Connor granted our motion for injunction, which prevents the Navy from forcing them to get it and prevents the Navy from taking action against them because they were being threatened with all sorts of things. It was verbal, a lot of they wouldn't put it in writing, but our clients have been told everything from you'll be court-martialed, you'll be dishonorably discharged, And once we're through with that, we might actually sue you individually to recoup the money we spent training you to be a SEAL, which would be hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars per SEAL. The court granted that injunction, so now the underlying litigation is moving forward. So churches and ministries, military, public schools, Coach Kennedy, students and teachers, and then what we call sort of the public at large, like just living your life according to your beliefs. And that's really what the free exercise clause is all about. Right? It's about living in all aspects of your life according to your deepest held convictions. And it's maybe the only place in the English language you will hear some people try to convince you that the word exercise means belief. Right? Because if that's all it is, if you're just free, well, sure, you're free to believe whatever you want to believe. But Coach Kennedy, when you go to work, you got to leave that behind. Aaron Melissa Klein, when you run your business, you got to leave that behind. You're free to believe whatever you want. Just don't try to put it into practice, right? That would constrain the First Amendment protection in your religious beliefs to just between your own ears, or maybe within the four walls of your church. But if you notice in the last couple of years, they tried to tell us we couldn't go to church either. We filed the very first lawsuit in the country on that issue. We sued the governor of Kentucky. His attorney general joined us in suing him, and we won. And we have not lost a case on that issue since the beginning of the pandemic. Keep the churches open.
Thank you.
So that's my invitation to you. Is the free exercise clause is about exercising your faith. Like exercise. Just look at the semantics of it. You don't have to be a constitutional scholar or a lawyer. Exercise implies activity, right? If all it took for me to have six-pack abs is just to believe in my heart that I have them, I would have it, right? But I don't, because it requires a certain amount of activity to get them that I'm unwilling to do. So live out your faith. Hear me clearly, I'm not telling you to go out there and cause trouble so you can become one of our clients. If trouble finds you, that's when you find us. Right? It's very simple to find. It's firstliberty.org. Right at the top of the page, there's two buttons you cannot miss. One says get legal help, the other says donate. Because we can't do the work unless somebody does it. So, if there's time, I know I probably went long. I tried to talk fast. I'm from Northeast Arkansas. I'm in law school. Ole Miss, talking fast does not come naturally to me. If there's time, I will take some questions.
Yes, let's go ahead. Does anybody have questions for Lathan or First Liberty?
Thank you again for all that you've done for our veterans and for representing our faith out there. We look forward to the next elections in the United States. It seems like voting integrity is on the tip of everybody's tongue. Are you guys having any cases come across your desk on this?
Not really, because by our mission statement of our board of directors, there must be a religious liberty on that issue. There's a lot of people doing good work on that.
Good question. Yes.
Well, I believe that the First Amendment is very tolerant of all faiths. There's one religion that is especially intolerant, and as they grow in population in a culture, they take over, and it's become monolithic and the very opposite of freedom, and that's Islam. And I mean, Europe is a prime example of that. So I don't know where I'm going with this. It's like Christianity. Isn't Christianity tolerant? I mean, we want to win people to Christ, and we do that by loving them and being tolerant. Islam is the opposite of freedom, and it is intolerant.
So, as I said before, we're listed as a Christian ministry. All the people who work at First Liberty are Christian. We have a statement of faith that we will represent people who believe faith. I've been there almost 5 years. We've had one Muslim client in that time. Frankly, it's because the people that like to make trouble for people of faith, leave them alone. They don't see the two guys. But we did have one Muslim client, the Islamic Association of Collin County, which is right in our backyard. They bought some property to develop as a cemetery because there was only, I think, maybe 2 Muslim cemeteries in all the metroplex. And they were running out of room, which made those plots very expensive. So they bought some property to develop as a cemetery right outside of Farmersville, Texas. And the mayor in that town actually campaigned, we took a screenshot of our website, campaigned on keeping the Muslims out of Farmersville. Now, there's a little federal law called the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act
Those people own that property and have the right to use it for religious land use. So we evaluate every request for help that comes in, individually. The free exercise to do what, right? Try to establish Sharia law as above the Constitution? No. Bury your dead according to your religious practices? Of course. Right? So we represented them, let the city know that we were planning on suing them in federal court. Also let some friends at the Justice Department know about it. And this was right around the time President Trump had enacted a travel ban on countries that frankly sponsor terrorism and was being criticized for his quote Muslim travel ban. So we called up the Justice Department and said, hey, would the Trump administration like to represent some Muslims in deep red Texas? And their response was, how soon can we get there? So when the Justice Department shows up, and the city understands the Justice Department is the biggest law firm in the world. They got all the time in the world, all the resources they need. In the interim, somebody else ran for mayor and defeated that mayor on basically the premise of enough is enough. I'm not going to bankrupt this city defending a lawsuit we can't win. These people own this property. They have the right to use it to bury their dead, and we should let them. And he won. So we had, okay. That's the one Muslim case that we've had in the time that I've been. But you're right in that there are lots of people who are intolerant of a lot of different faiths. Some of our clients, our Orthodox Jewish clients, it would amaze you some of the things that they have to deal with. We represent a small Orthodox Jewish community up in New York, outside New York City, where the city, it's called the Village of Airmont, actually has a city ordinance that says, in order for you to host a religious gathering in your home, you have to get a permit from the city. Now, they do this because Orthodox Jews worship typically in the home of their rabbi. And we have clients up there that have spent $30,000 trying to get this permit and still don't have it. So we're partnering again with the Justice Department, going up to the city of Airmont. We represented a similar situation in Dallas, where at first the homeowners association sued this Orthodox Jewish rabbi, claiming it had nothing to do with this religion. To which we showed the court the pictures of the swastika that had been spray painted on his car and how his home had been vandalized. So we sued the HOA and won. The city of Dallas, what he was doing, he was converting a portion of his home to a space for them to worship. And that triggered all of Dallas's building codes. So every time he had a hearing, these people would show up and say, oh, we're really concerned about safety in this neighborhood with all the people walking to and from. And I kid you not, the last hurdle, because we had to end up suing the city of Dallas, but we settled it all. The last hurdle we had to get over with the city of Dallas was whether or not the rabbi had provided enough parking spaces in front of his home. They're Orthodox Jews. They don't drive on the Sabbath. They walk to his house. That's why they all live in the same neighborhood. Big dumb government at its best, right? So we worked out a parking agreement with a school across the road. There's plenty of parking spaces. Okay. So you asked me what time it is, and I'm telling you how to build a clock. But that's kind of what lawyers do. So, if there's time for more questions, I'll take them. Otherwise, I will hang around afterwards and be happy to talk with you individually. I know there's probably a lot of questions on the COVID vaccine mandate. The Supreme Court granted that emergency stay on the OSHA mandate, so it's not in effect right now. Sixth Circuit is hearing that case. The number one factor in whether or not you're going to grant a stay or an injunction is, do you think the person you ask for is likely to win on the merits of their case? So the fact that the Supreme Court granted that tells the Sixth Circuit, the Supreme Court thinks these guys are probably going to win. So Sixth Circuit, get this right. Okay. So I'm confident the Sixth Circuit's going to do the right thing. Either way, the government will probably appeal to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court will do it again. So it's not in effect. If you or your business have questions about that, we created a document. It's a free download from our website. It kind of teaches you how to request an exemption, a religious exemption from the vaccine. It's on the website. Download it, read it, use it, and then if you're denied, then get in contact with us. If we can, we will help you. We are inundated with requests. For the first time in 5 years, we had to automate our phone system. that if you're calling about the vaccine, please go to the website and download this, and then call us back. Because lots of people have newly discovered religious convictions when it comes to vaccines. And that's okay, it doesn't matter if they're new or old, you're still entitled to accommodation. So I've been talking for a long time, but thank y'all for